little hints that I'll add into the mix from what I observed, which, and I observed you working really well. And I said it to quite a few pairs working on the floor. Working on the floor is it's very difficult lifting up a shoulder on the floor. You know, it's relatively easy on the table. So one of the things, and I'm looking around, I think most of you found it, was to get really low. In order for you to use the lever, and in fact last week I said I wasn't going to show you how to lift a shoulder off on the floor because it's too hard. But, you know, you're all such geniuses, I've done it anyway. But if somebody is on the floor and you're under their shoulder, you have to be down really low. If you're up here, you can't access your wrist anymore because you've got a break in your wrist here. So you actually have to get really low. Now, if you can't get that low, you can't get that low. But if you're going to do that pushing of the back of the wrist into the floor to leave, your forearms have to be there, down there. Okay, so that's one thing. Now, the other thing, I know last week you were playing with the inverted rainbow for the foot. I think for today, try and do the opposite. There's always a contradiction in Feldenkrais. Can't I just have someone lying? I'll show you the difference. When you're on the floor, this is particularly because you're working on the floor. So, you know, I hope you're robust enough for me to make mistakes with you. So there's if you keep the foot really low, when you're going like this, for example, I mean, Yona actually doesn't even like it. I can feel she's, now she's getting into it. Oh, now she's just proving that I can do it. But what was happening with some people, I'm going to impose this on you, Yona, is that there was more of a waggling like that. So there was more of a sliding. She's not doing it. She's just hopeless. She can't do it wrong. She's just right. It was more sort of in and out of the hip joint. So maybe when you're working on the floor, you might need to get the foot up a little bit higher and just actually notice that what we're doing is trying to engage the hip in a rotation movement. So you might need to be a bit high, and you'll actually drop down a little bit that way so that she can feel the movement clearly in the hip joint. If you're down here and you're kind of waggling, I don't know if you can see, I'm actually losing a lot in the knee joint. Yeah. And there's a lot of torque, T-O-R-Q-U-E, in that knee joint. That for some people it doesn't feel very nice at all, right? So just find a way. If the higher the foot, the less you're going to usually torque the knee, and you will get a quicker force transmission straight up into the hip joint. It's, you know, if you can do it down here, it feels, why we like to do it with the foot low eventually, it's because it's more like standing, and they'll get a sense of hip rotation in standing, which is actually what we often are after from a functional point of view. But if you are trying to impose this U-shaped thing, you're likely to lose a lot in the knee at this, especially working on the floor. Did anyone notice that?
I missed that last one. So what's the purpose of the inverted?
I think it works well when you have 2 feet. See how that's kind of different with 2 feet, because I'm really getting it's a different question. Yeah. So I'll just leave that for now. And why you do the U shape too is when we're going into sliding the knee, which we're not doing on the floor because it's too hard. It's just too hard on the floor. It's really good that you've been exposed to it, so you know we do it a lot. But we'll, as I said last week, we'll build up to that when you're working on tables, because it's just bloody torture on the floor. We're mean, but we're not that mean. All right? Is that clarified things? So looking for that, you're looking for the shaft of the femur to be rotating in the hip joint rather than swinging side to side. And that's, you know, some people that might not make any sense because it wasn't happening with your person. But anyway, it's that being clear. Feel free to make the mistake with each other if your knees are okay. Because that's really interesting in itself. If you're losing a lot of, see now there, I'm not really engaging a hip at all. That's the torque in the knee that I'm talking about, right? Now for some people that's very differentiating because the knee is meant to rotate a bit. Some people rotate too much in their knee, it just feels bloody sloppy. and what you're wanting to do is connect, like get the knee to disappear so that they do transmit up into the hip. And then the other thing you can play around with is if you're holding right on the foot, then you've got another degree of freedom happening in the ankle joint, which you may want sometimes and sometimes you don't. So play around with this. I wasn't just detailed enough when I showed you this, but to pick up, to know where you're picking up will make a difference. And none of them are right or wrong. They're just different. They'll have a different response, and you'll feel that. So you can see how the possibilities start exploding when we're demonstrating, you know, exponentially exploding. Try and limit yourself. This is rich coming from me about not going off on tangents. Or do as I say, not as I do.
Okay.
Yep. And be relatively kind of precise about the questions. Yep. And I'm saying that just because of time. You know, you're starting to get into the space now where you can explore all day, but I've got a curriculum, thank you very much. And I get paid on my outputs, don't I, Jen? And if I don't deliver, I don't get paid. So onto it. Find those answers. Half an hour.
Seriously?
Seriously. Or less. Thank you, Yona.